The millionaire who discovered his maid secretly helping his disabled daughter walk again. His shocking response changed all their lives forever. The crystal paperweight slipped from Victoria's trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the mansion's grand foyer, but neither she nor the man standing frozen in the doorway seemed to notice. Between them, 8-year-old Emma took another shaky, determined step forward, her tiny hand gripping Victoria's with fierce trust, her voice a whisper of pure joy. "Look, Daddy. I'm walking to you. Welcome to our Stories with Goodness family, where hope lives." If you're new to this channel, we're so glad you found us. Take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from all around the world. If these stories of hope and transformation touch your heart, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you never miss a story that might be exactly what you need to hear. And let's start with a prayer for everyone watching today, that we all find the love and healing we need in our lives. Now, let's continue with Harrison's story. Time seemed suspended in that vast foyer, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the cathedral windows illuminating what should have been impossible. Harrison Matthews, tech mogul, Wall Street darling, and father who had been told 3 years ago that his daughter would never walk again, stood paralyzed as his world shifted on its axis. Emma's legs, thin from months of physical therapy that had yielded nothing but medical bills and crushed hopes, trembled beneath her small frame. But she was moving. Step by careful step, supported by the woman he'd barely noticed in the 6 months she'd worked in his home. "Emma." His voice cracked like a teenager's, all his boardroom confidence evaporating. How are you?" Victoria Torres looked up at him, her dark eyes wide with something between triumph and terror. She was still in her simple gray uniform, her black hair pulled back in its usual modest bun, but there was something different about her now, a fierce protectiveness radiating from her small frame. "Mr. Matthews," she began, her slight accent making his name sound softer than he'd ever heard it. "I can explain." "Don't stop, Mija," she whispered to Emma, never breaking eye contact with Harrison. "You're doing so well." Emma giggled, actually giggled, as she took another step. "Victoria says I'm getting stronger every day. She says my muscles just needed someone to believe in them." The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. 6 months. This woman had been in his house for 6 months, and in that time, she'd accomplished what teams of physical therapists, specialists, and expensive equipment couldn't. More than that, Emma was laughing. When was the last time he'd heard his daughter laugh? "How long?" he managed, his throat tight. Victoria's chin lifted slightly, and he caught a glimpse of steel beneath her gentle demeanor. 3 months. "We started slowly, just small exercises while you were at work. Behind my back." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and he watched Victoria flinch. But Emma's face crumpled, and that broke something inside him he didn't even know still existed. "Daddy, don't be mad at Victoria," Emma pleaded, her little legs wavering. "She's been helping me get better. She said maybe one day I could run to the swings like other kids." Harrison's throat closed completely. The swings. He'd had them removed from the backyard 2 years ago because seeing them empty was too painful. He'd told himself it was practical. He'd told himself a lot of things. "Keep going, sweetheart," Victoria encouraged gently, steadying Emma as the little girl's steps grew more confident. "Show your papa how strong you are." "Papa." The word in Victoria's accented voice did something to Harrison's chest, something warm and unfamiliar. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had called him that instead of Mr. Matthews or Harrison. Emma beamed and took 3 more steps before her legs gave out slightly. Victoria caught her instantly, lifting her with practiced ease. "That was amazing, little one. Tomorrow we'll try for even more." "Tomorrow?" Harrison found himself asking. Victoria met his gaze directly, and he saw no apology there, only quiet determination. "If you'll let me." Emma had fallen asleep in Victoria's arms during the conversation that followed, and now the two adults faced each other across the living room's uncomfortable silence. Harrison had sent his usual staff home early and dismissed his driver. For the first time in years, his house felt like a home. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria carefully adjusted Emma's position, her movements tender and practiced. "Would you have let me try?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Harrison wanted to say yes, wanted to believe he would have supported anything that might help his daughter. But the truth sat heavy in his chest. "No," he admitted. "I would have stopped you." "I know." Victoria's voice held no judgment, only sadness. "I've watched you with her, Mr. Matthews. You love her so much it's breaking you. But love that's afraid, it can't always heal." He stared at this woman, this maid he'd barely acknowledged, who had somehow seen through him so completely. The doctors said many things. They said her spinal compression might improve with time. They said patience and consistent therapy could help. They said hope was important. Victoria's eyes flashed. "But you stopped hearing them after might never walk again." The words stung because they were true. After the accident, the car crash that had stolen his wife and left Emma fighting for her life, Harrison had armored himself against hope. Hope hurt too much when it died. "I couldn't watch her fail again," he whispered. "I couldn't watch her try and what? Still be disabled." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "Mr. Matthews, your daughter isn't failing. She's been succeeding every single day, just not in the ways you wanted to see." Emma stirred in Victoria's arms, murmuring something in her sleep. Victoria smoothed her hair back with infinite tenderness, and Harrison realized this wasn't just about walking. This was about love, the kind of patient, believing love he'd forgotten how to give. "Show me," he said suddenly. "Show me what you've been doing with her." Victoria looked up, surprised. "It's getting late. She should rest." "Tomorrow, then. Show me tomorrow." He paused, something shifting inside his chest. "Please." For the first time since he'd walked through that door, Victoria smiled. It transformed her entire face, revealing a beauty that had nothing to do with features and everything to do with the light in her eyes. "I'd like that, Mr. Matthews. I'd like that very much." As she carried Emma upstairs, Harrison sank into his leather chair and buried his face in his hands. The crystal paperweight still lay in pieces on the foyer floor, but somehow, he felt like something broken in him had begun to heal. The next morning arrived with the kind of golden California light that made everything look possible. Harrison had barely slept, his mind replaying the image of Emma's determined steps and Victoria's unwavering belief. He'd canceled his morning meetings, something that would have been unthinkable a week ago, and found himself pacing the kitchen at 7 a.m., waiting. Victoria arrived at her usual time, but today Harrison was there to greet her. She paused in the doorway, clearly surprised to see him in jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual tailored suit. "Mr. Matthews? Is everything all right?" "I want to see," he said simply. "Everything. How you've been working with Emma." Something flickered across Victoria's face, relief, maybe, or hope. "She's still sleeping. But there's something else you should see first." She led him through the house to a room he rarely entered, what used to be his wife Sarah's art studio, now converted into a storage space for Emma's medical equipment. But as Victoria opened the door, Harrison's breath caught. The room had been transformed into something magical. Soft mats covered the floor, and colorful resistance bands hung from specially installed hooks. But it wasn't the equipment that stopped him cold, it was the walls. Every surface was covered with Emma's artwork. Drawings of a little girl running, jumping, dancing. Pictures of Victoria and Emma together, both of them smiling. And in the center of it all, a painting that made Harrison's knees weak. A family of 3, holding hands under a rainbow, with words written in Emma's careful 8-year-old handwriting. "When I walk again, we'll all be happy." "She painted this," he whispered. "2 weeks ago," Victoria said softly. "She wanted it to be a surprise for you." Harrison moved closer to the painting, his hands trembling. In Emma's innocent rendering, the father figure was smiling, something he realized he couldn't remember doing in front of his daughter for months. "I've been so blind," he murmured. "Not blind," Victoria corrected gently. "Just scared. Fear can make us miss beautiful things." The sound of small feet padding down the hallway interrupted them. Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes that went wide when she saw her father. "Daddy? You're still home. I wanted to see your special room, sweetheart." Harrison knelt down to her level, his voice thick with emotion. "Victoria showed me your beautiful paintings." Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Do you like them?" "Victoria helped me reach the high parts, but I did all the colors myself. They're the most beautiful paintings I've ever seen." And he meant it. When was the last time he'd really looked at his daughter's art? When was the last time he'd really looked at his daughter? Victoria moved to a corner of the room and began setting up what looked like a simple obstacle course. Foam blocks, balance beams set just inches off the ground, colorful cones arranged in patterns. "This is where we practice," she explained to Harrison. "Emma calls it her adventure course. It's like a playground." Emma clapped her hands excitedly. "But better, because I'm getting stronger every time we play." Play. Harrison realized that's exactly what it was. While he'd been thinking of Emma's condition as a medical problem to be solved, Victoria had turned healing into joy. "Show me, baby girl," he said, settling onto one of the mats. "Show Daddy your adventures." What happened next was nothing short of miraculous, not because Emma walked, but because Harrison finally saw her trying. Really saw her. Victoria started with gentle stretches, turning each movement into a game. "Now we're butterflies, spreading our wings," she said, helping Emma extend her arms and legs. Emma giggled, making fluttering sounds that filled the room with lightness Harrison hadn't felt in years. "Papa, watch this." Emma called out, using Victoria's word for him without seeming to realize it. She gripped the parallel bars Victoria had installed and slowly, carefully, pulled herself to standing. Her legs shook, but her smile was pure determination. "Look how strong you are," Harrison breathed, and meant it. He'd been so focused on what she couldn't do that he'd missed everything she could. "Victoria says my muscles are like sleeping bears," Emma explained, concentrating hard as she took small steps between the bars. "And every day, we wake them up a little more." Harrison glanced at Victoria, who was spotting Emma with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. "How did you know to do this? Do you have training in physical therapy?" Victoria's hands never left Emma's waist as the little girl moved. "My younger brother had cerebral palsy. Different from Emma's injury, but I learned that sometimes the best therapy is just someone believing you can do it." "Had Harrison asked quietly. "He died when he was 12, Victoria said simply, her voice steady but soft. "But before he did, he taught me that our bodies might be broken, but our spirits don't have to be." Emma had made it halfway across the bars when she looked back at her father. "Daddy, will you catch me if I fall?" The question hit Harrison like a physical blow. How many times had Emma asked for him to catch her, literally and figuratively, and he'd been too consumed with his own fear to say yes. "Always, baby girl," he said, moving to position himself at the end of the bars. "Always." Emma's face transformed with pure trust, and she began moving faster, her steps more confident. When she reached the end, she practically launched herself into her father's arms, both of them laughing as he caught her and spun her around. "I did it! I did it!" Emma squealed. "Did you see, Victoria? Did you see how far I went?" "I saw everything, Mija," Victoria said, and Harrison caught the tears she was trying to hide. "You were perfect." As Harrison held his daughter, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair and feeling the solid warmth of her small body against his chest, he realized something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't just about Emma learning to walk again. This was about all of them learning to hope again. "Victoria," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "How can I ever thank you?" She met his eyes across the room, and in that moment, Harrison saw something he hadn't noticed before, or maybe hadn't allowed himself to notice. Victoria wasn't just beautiful. She was luminous with the kind of inner light that came from a heart that chose love even when it hurt. "Just be here," she said simply. "Be present for her journey. That's all the thanks I need." But as Emma chattered excitedly about showing him more exercises, Harrison found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the only thing he wanted to give her. The corporate boardroom felt like a tomb compared to the light-filled therapy room Harrison had left behind. He sat at the head of the gleaming conference table, trying to focus on quarterly projections and market analyses, but his mind kept drifting to Emma's laughter and the way Victoria's eyes had sparkled when she called him Papa. Harrison. His business partner, David Chun, was staring at him with concern. "The Nakamura deal? You were saying something about restructuring the timeline." Harrison blinked, realizing he'd been silent for a full minute. Around the table, 12 of the city's most powerful executives waited for his response, a response he couldn't give because all he could think about was his daughter's artwork covering those walls. "Postpone it," he said abruptly. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. The Nakamura deal was worth $50 million. Postpone it. David's eyebrows shot up. "Harrison, we've been working on this for 8 months. The contracts are ready for signature tomorrow." "I said postpone it." Harrison's voice carried the authority that had built his empire, but inside, he felt anything but authoritative. He felt like a man waking up from a long, cold sleep. After the meeting dissolved into confused whispers and hastily rescheduled calls, Harrison found himself alone with David, who closed the door and fixed him with a look of genuine concern. "What's going on with you? Ever since Sarah died, you've been married to this company. Now suddenly you're postponing major deals and leaving early every day this week." The mention of his wife's name sent the familiar spike of pain through Harrison's chest, followed immediately by something new: guilt. Not just grief for Sarah, but guilt that for the first time in 3 years, he'd gone almost an entire day without the crushing weight of loss consuming him. "Emma's getting better," he said quietly. "Better how?" "I thought the doctors said." The doctors were wrong. Harrison moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Or maybe I was wrong about what better looks like." David joined him at the window. They'd been friends since college, business partners for 15 years. If anyone could understand, it would be David. "It's the new Maid, isn't it?" David's voice was carefully neutral. "The one you hired after Rosa retired?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "Her name is Victoria. And she's not just a maid." "Harrison." David's voice carried a warning. "Be careful." "Careful of what?" "You're vulnerable right now. Emma's progress, whatever's happening, it's wonderful. But don't confuse gratitude with other feelings." The words hit their mark, and Harrison felt his defenses slam back into place. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you're a wealthy widower, and she's a woman who works in your house. These situations, they get complicated." "Complicated?" Harrison's voice went cold. "Like I'm some kind of predator who can't tell the difference between professional care and personal interest? That's not what I meant. Isn't it?" Harrison turned from the window, his business mask sliding back into place. "Or maybe you're worried that I might actually care about someone who isn't from our social circle. Someone who works for a living instead of inheriting their way through life." David held up his hands. "I'm trying to protect you. And Emma. What happens when this woman gets tired of playing house? What happens when she realizes there might be financial opportunities in your gratitude?" The accusation hung in the air like poison. Harrison felt something inside him go very still and very cold. "Get out of my office." "Harrison." "Get out." After David left, Harrison stood alone in his glass tower, looking down at the city that had once felt like his kingdom. But now it felt like a prison he'd built around himself, brick by brick, deal by deal, until he'd forgotten there was a world outside where little girls painted rainbows and women believed in miracles. By the time Harrison arrived home that evening, the damage was done. The poison David had planted had taken root, fed by 3 years of grief and a lifetime of people wanting things from him. He found Victoria in the kitchen, preparing Emma's dinner while his daughter chattered excitedly about her day at school. The scene was so domestic, so natural, that it stopped him in the doorway. "Daddy." Emma's face lit up when she saw him. "Guess what? I stood up by myself during circle time today. Mrs. Peterson said she was so proud." That's wonderful, sweetheart." But his voice sounded flat even to his own ears. Victoria glanced up from the stove, and he saw the exact moment she registered the change in his demeanor. Her smile faded, replaced by something cautious and wounded. "Mr. Matthews," she said formally, and the return to his title felt like a door slamming shut. "I made extra pasta if you'd like to join Emma for dinner." "That won't be necessary." The words came out harsher than he intended. "I have some calls to make." Emma's face fell. "But you promised we could work on my walking after dinner. You said we could try the new exercise Victoria taught me." Harrison looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the confusion and hurt in her 8-year-old eyes. She didn't understand why her father had suddenly gone cold again, why the warmth she'd felt for the past few days was disappearing. "Emma, you need to understand something," he said, hating himself even as the words left his mouth. "Victoria is here to help take care of the house and assist with your needs. But we shouldn't get too attached to situations that might change." Victoria's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Mr. Matthews, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that perhaps we've gotten a bit too informal in our arrangements here." The words hung in the air like a slap. Emma looked back and forth between the two adults, her bottom lip starting to tremble. "But Victoria is my friend," Emma said in a small voice. "She helps me get strong." "And that's her job," Harrison replied, each word feeling like swallowing glass. "But we need to remember that's what it is. A job." Victoria set down the wooden spoon she'd been holding, her movements careful and controlled. "Of course, Mr. Matthews. I apologize if I overstepped any boundaries." "Victoria, no." Emma's voice cracked. Tell him about the walking practice and the paintings and how we're going to surprise him when I can run." But Victoria just smoothed down her uniform and nodded professionally. "Your father is right, Mija. I'm here to work, and I should remember that." Harrison watched the light drain from both of their faces and felt like the worst kind of coward. But David's words echoed in his head. What happens when she realizes there might be financial opportunities in your gratitude? I'll be in my study, he said, and walked away from the two people who had begun to feel like family. Behind him, he heard Emma start to cry, not the dramatic tears of a child's tantrum, but the heartbroken sobs of someone who didn't understand why love had suddenly turned cold. And beneath that, Victoria's soft voice, offering comfort while her own heart was breaking. Harrison closed his study door and sank into his chair, surrounded by the trophies of his success and the silence of his isolation. He told himself he was protecting Emma from getting too attached. He told himself he was being practical. But deep down he knew the truth. He was protecting himself from the terrifying possibility that someone might actually love them both, not for his money, not for what he could provide, but simply for who they were. And that scared him more than any business deal ever could. What do you think about Harrison's reaction? Have you ever let fear make you push away someone who is trying to help? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes we need to hear from others who've walked this path. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with the same fears. Have you subscribed yet? Please, I highly recommend it. 3 days of polite, professional distance had turned the mansion into a mausoleum. Victoria arrived precisely at 8, performed her duties with quiet efficiency, worked with Emma in clinical silence, and left at exactly 5:30. No more laughter echoed through the halls. No more paintings appeared on the therapy room walls. Emma moved through her exercises with mechanical obedience, the joy drained from her small face. Harrison threw himself back into work with savage intensity, staying at the office until well past Emma's bedtime, but even 16-hour days couldn't quiet the voice in his head that whispered he was destroying the best thing that had happened to his family in years. Everything changed on Thursday evening. The call came at 6:47 p.m., just as Harrison was reviewing contracts that seemed to blur together on the page. Mrs. Henderson's panicked voice crackled through his phone. "Mr. Matthews, you need to come home immediately. There's been an accident." Harrison's blood turned to ice. Emma. She's alive, but she fell down the main staircase. Victoria found her and called 911. The paramedics are here now. The drive home became a nightmare of red lights and stop-and-go traffic that made Harrison want to abandon his car and run. His hands shook on the steering wheel as worst-case scenarios played through his mind. Spinal injury. Head trauma. All the progress lost. All the hope shattered. He burst through his front door to find controlled chaos. 2 paramedics knelt beside a small form on the living room sofa, their calm voices a sharp contrast to the terror clawing at his chest. "Daddy." Emma's voice was weak but clear, and Harrison nearly collapsed with relief. She was conscious, alert, talking. But as he moved closer, he could see the angry bruise blooming across her forehead and the way she held her left arm protectively against her chest. "What happened?" he demanded, dropping to his knees beside the sofa. "Possible concussion, definitely some bruising, potential sprain in the left wrist," the lead paramedic, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, reported efficiently. "She's stable, but we need to take her in for observation and X-rays." "I was trying to surprise you," Emma whispered, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. "I wanted to walk down the big stairs by myself, to show you I was getting better. But my legs got wobbly and I fell." Harrison's heart shattered completely. She'd been trying to prove herself to him. After 3 days of his cold distance, his little girl had risked everything to win back his approval. "Oh, baby girl," he breathed, brushing her hair back from the bruise on her forehead. "You never have to prove anything to me. Never." "Sir." The paramedic's voice was gentle but insistent. "We really should get her to the hospital now." It was only then that Harrison noticed Victoria, standing pressed against the far wall like she was trying to disappear. Her face was pale, her hands clasped so tightly together that her knuckles were white. Her uniform was torn at the sleeve, and he could see scrapes on her arms. "Victoria," he said, his voice rough. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly. "I'm fine." I heard her call out and found her at the bottom of the stairs. The paramedics said I shouldn't move her, so I stayed with her until they came. She held my hand the whole time, Emma added weakly. She sang to me in Spanish, so I wouldn't be scared. Harrison looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and saw the raw terror in her dark eyes. This woman who had treated his daughter like family was falling apart with worry, but she was trying to stay strong because she thought it was her job. "You're coming with us," he said suddenly. Victoria blinked in surprise. "Mr. Matthews, I don't think that's appropriate." "I don't care what's appropriate." The words came out fiercer than he intended. "Emma needs you. And—" His voice caught. "So do I." The hospital waiting room at 11 p.m. was a purgatory of fluorescent lights and uncomfortable plastic chairs. Emma was stable, mild concussion, sprained wrist, impressive collection of bruises, but nothing that wouldn't heal. The doctors wanted to keep her overnight for observation, and she was finally sleeping peacefully in a private room down the hall. Harrison and Victoria sat in the waiting area, sharing the terrible intimacy of parents who had nearly lost their child. The formal distance of the past 3 days had crumbled completely in the face of real crisis. "This is my fault," Victoria said quietly, staring at her hands. "I should have been watching her more carefully. I should have known she would try something like this." "No." Harrison's voice was absolute. "This is my fault. I made her feel like she had to prove herself to me. I made her think my love was conditional on her progress." Victoria turned to look at him, and he saw exhaustion and pain etched in every line of her face. "She loves you so much, Mr. Matthews. All she wants is to make you proud." "I am proud of her," Harrison said, his voice breaking slightly. "I've always been proud of her. I got scared." "Scared of what?" The question hung between them in the sterile air. Harrison could feel the walls he'd rebuilt starting to crumble again, and this time he didn't have the strength to hold them up. "Scared of losing someone else I love," he admitted. "Scared of caring too much and having it ripped away again." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly he almost missed it, "And scared of caring about me?" The honesty in her voice broke something open in Harrison's chest. He turned to face her fully, seeing past the uniform and the careful professional mask to the woman beneath, the woman who had brought laughter back into his home, hope back into his daughter's life, and light back into his own dark world. "Terrified," he whispered. "Because of what people might think? Because I work for you. Because you're the first person since Sarah died who's made me want to be better than I am." The words came out in a rush, 3 days of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. "Because when I see you with Emma, when I see the way you believe in her, the way you believe in both of us, I start to believe it too. And that's terrifying." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Matthews." "Harrison," he said. "Please. Just. Harrison. Harrison." His name sounded different in her voice, softer, warmer. "I need you to know something. I didn't take this job looking for anything except work. I didn't plan on caring about Emma the way I do. I didn't plan on—" She paused, her voice getting smaller. "I didn't plan on falling in love with your family." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they were brave enough to cross. "The past 3 days have been hell," Harrison admitted. "Coming home to silence. Watching Emma's light go out. Watching you try to disappear." He reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand, noting how perfectly it fit in his. I don't want to live like that anymore. What are you saying? I'm saying David was wrong. I'm saying I've spent 3 years being afraid to live because I was so afraid of losing. I'm saying that maybe Emma isn't the only one who needs to learn to walk again. Victoria's thumb traced across his knuckles, and he marveled at how such a simple touch could feel like coming home. The road isn't easy, she said quietly. Love after loss, trust after betrayal, hope after heartbreak. It's like Emma learning to walk. One step at a time, and sometimes you fall. Will you help me? Harrison asked, his voice barely audible. The way you helped her? Victoria lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to his knuckles, and Harrison felt something in his chest that had been frozen for 3 years finally begin to thaw. One step at a time, she promised. Down the hall, Emma slept peacefully, unaware that in the hospital waiting room, her family was quietly knitting itself back together, not just as employer and employee, not just as patient and caregiver, but as something new and fragile and infinitely precious. Something that looked, for the first time in years, like hope. 2 weeks later, Emma was back to her exercises with renewed determination, sporting a pink cast on her wrist that she decorated with stickers of butterflies and rainbows. Her fall had scared all of them, but it had also somehow freed them from the pretense that had been strangling their connection. Harrison had rearranged his schedule to be home every day by 4, and what had started as checking on Emma's progress had gradually evolved into something that looked remarkably like a family routine. He'd watch the therapy sessions, help with homework, stay for dinner. Victoria had stopped calling him Mr. Matthews, and the sound of his name in her voice had become something he looked forward to more than any business success. But it was a rainy Saturday afternoon, while Emma napped after an especially challenging session, that the careful foundation they'd been building nearly crumbled under the weight of hidden truth. Harrison found Victoria in the kitchen, staring out the window at the storm clouds with an expression he'd never seen before, haunted, distant, almost afraid. In her hands was a letter, the envelope bearing foreign stamps and handwriting that made her fingers tremble. Victoria. He approached carefully, recognizing the signs of someone trying not to fall apart. What is it? She didn't look at him, just held out the letter with a shaking hand. I need to tell you something. About why I really came to work for you. Harrison took the letter, noting immediately that it was addressed to Mrs. Victoria Morales, not Torres as he'd known her. The return address was from a law office in Guatemala. Morales, he asked gently. My married name. Her voice was barely a whisper. Was my married name. Harrison felt something cold settle in his stomach, but he kept his voice steady. You were married? I am married. Technically. Victoria finally turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. My husband, Miguel, he's in prison. Has been for 2 years. The words hit Harrison like a physical blow, but not for the reasons Victoria clearly expected. He wasn't angry about the deception. He was angry that someone had hurt her badly enough to make her afraid to tell the truth. What did he do? Harrison asked quietly. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold the pieces together. He got involved with some very bad people. Drug trafficking. I didn't know, I swear to you, I didn't know until the police came to our door. Her voice broke. They said he'd been using our restaurant, our home, our life as a front for moving money and drugs. Victoria. Harrison started, but she held up a hand. Let me finish. Please. Before I lose the courage. She took a shuddering breath. They arrested me too. Held me for 3 days while they investigated. My brother Diego, he was 12, was put in temporary foster care. When they finally realized I was innocent, They released me, but the damage was done. Our restaurant was seized. Our home. Everything. Harrison felt sick thinking about what she must have gone through. The fear, the humiliation, the betrayal by someone she'd trusted completely. Diego and I lost everything. The community we'd lived in our whole lives turned against us. People crossed the street to avoid us. Children weren't allowed to play with Diego anymore. Tears were streaming down her face now. So I brought him here, to Los Angeles, where my cousin lives. I was going to start over, find work, maybe open another small restaurant someday. What happened? Harrison asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer would break his heart. Diego got sick. Really sick. Leukemia. Victoria's voice was barely audible now. The treatments were so expensive, and we had no insurance, no money, no credit because of Miguel's crimes. I was working 3 jobs, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Harrison's chest felt tight. Is he? He died 8 months ago. The words came out flat, emotionless, the way people speak when the pain is too big for feeling. In a county hospital, with me holding his hand, promising him things would get better. He was 14 years old. Oh, Victoria. Harrison moved toward her, but she stepped back, shaking her head. You don't understand. The letter, it's from Miguel's lawyer. He's being released next month. Early parole for good behavior and information he provided about the drug operation. Victoria's voice turned bitter. Apparently, betraying your associates is considered rehabilitation. Harrison felt a surge of protective anger so fierce it surprised him. He can't just, you're divorced, right? No. Victoria's voice was small. In Guatemala, divorce is complicated, expensive. And after Diego got sick, I couldn't afford the legal fees. Technically, I'm still married to a man who destroyed my life and killed my brother. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture that made Harrison's heart break and burn with rage simultaneously. You took this job because you needed the money for Diego's treatment. I was desperate, Victoria admitted. Your ad said you needed someone immediately, live-in position, good pay. I thought I could save enough to get Diego into a better treatment facility. I thought I could save him. But you couldn't tell me the truth because you were afraid I wouldn't hire someone with a criminal husband. Victoria nodded miserably. And then when Diego died and I was all alone, this job became my lifeline. Working with Emma, seeing her progress, feeling like part of a family again, it saved me from drowning in grief. Harrison understood now why she'd been so devoted to Emma, why she'd poured such love and patience into helping a disabled child walk again. She'd been trying to save Emma because she couldn't save Diego. What does the letter say? He asked gently. Victoria's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. Miguel wants me to come back. He says he's a changed man, that he wants to start over. He says if I don't come back to him, he'll make sure everyone in Los Angeles knows what kind of family I come from. He has friends here, connections. He could destroy any chance I have of building a new life. He's threatening you. He's threatening you too, Victoria whispered. And Emma. If people find out you're employing the wife of a convicted drug dealer, if the media gets hold of it. She looked up at him with desperate eyes. I never meant for this to touch your life. I never meant to bring danger to Emma. Harrison felt something crystallize inside him, a fierce clarity he hadn't experienced since the day Emma was born. He stepped forward and gently took Victoria's face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. Victoria, listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice steady and sure. You are not responsible for your husband's crimes. You are not responsible for your brother's death. And you are sure as hell not responsible for protecting me and Emma from the truth about who you are. But the scandal. I don't care about scandal. The words came out fiercer than he intended. I care about you. I care about the woman who brought my daughter back to life. I care about the woman who taught me how to hope again. Victoria stared at him through her tears. What are you saying? I'm saying that if Miguel Morales wants to threaten my family, he's going to find out exactly what kind of resources a man like me has at his disposal. Harrison's voice carried the cold steel that had made him one of the most feared negotiators in corporate America. And I'm saying that it's time you stopped running from your past and started building your future. Harrison, you don't understand what you're saying. The kind of people Miguel knows are about to learn that they picked the wrong family to threaten. Harrison pulled her into his arms, feeling her tremble against his chest. You're not alone anymore, Victoria. You're not facing this alone. For the first time since he'd found her with that letter, Victoria let herself lean into his strength. And Harrison realized that sometime in the past few weeks, without quite meaning to, they'd stopped being employer and employee and become something much more dangerous, a family worth fighting for. The rain had stopped by evening, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling under the emerging stars. Emma was in bed, exhausted from a day of what she called extra brave walking practice, and the house had settled into the peaceful quiet that had become Harrison's favorite time of day. He found Victoria in the therapy room, carefully cleaning Emma's equipment and reorganizing the art supplies. She moved with methodical precision, the way people do when they're trying to keep their minds occupied, but Harrison could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful control that spoke of someone holding themselves together by sheer will. She doesn't have to know, Victoria said without looking up from the resistance bands she was coiling. About Miguel, about my past. Emma's been through enough upheaval in her life. Victoria. Harrison's voice was gentle but firm. Stop. She paused in her organizing, her hand stilling on a set of colorful markers. Stop what? Stop trying to manage everyone else's feelings. Stop trying to protect us from the truth. Stop acting like you're not part of this family. The word hung in the air between them, family, and Harrison saw Victoria's careful composure crack just slightly. I don't know how to do that, she admitted quietly. I've been taking care of other people for so long, I've forgotten how to let anyone take care of me. Harrison moved closer, his heart aching at the vulnerability in her voice. Then let me teach you. The way you taught Emma to walk again. One step at a time. Victoria finally looked up at him, and in her dark eyes he saw years of accumulated pain, the betrayal of a husband she'd trusted, the loss of a brother she'd loved, the weight of carrying everyone's burdens while her own heart broke in silence. I'm scared, she whispered. Of Miguel. Of this. She gestured between them, her voice barely audible. Of caring about you and Emma so much that losing you would destroy me. I've already lost everyone I've ever loved, Harrison. I don't think I'm strong enough to survive it again. Harrison reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands the way he had that afternoon. But this time, there was no crisis, no emergency, just two people choosing to be vulnerable with each other. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked softly. Victoria shook her head, tears threatening to spill over. I see a woman who lost everything and chose to rebuild. I see someone who watched her brother die and still had enough love left to help my daughter live. I see the strongest person I've ever met, and she has no idea how extraordinary she is. Harrison. Victoria's voice broke on his name. I see the woman who saved my family, he continued, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how precious she is." The confession hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying in its implications. Victoria searched his face as if looking for signs that he didn't mean it, that this was just gratitude or pity disguised as something deeper. "I love you," Harrison said simply, the words falling into the space between them like a gift. "I love your strength and your gentleness. I love the way you see possibility where others see only problems. I love that you taught my daughter to dream again, and you taught me to hope again. I love you, Victoria, not despite your past, but because of everything that made you who you are." Victoria's composure finally shattered completely. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, not the careful, controlled tears she'd been holding back, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone finally allowing themselves to feel everything they'd been suppressing. Harrison pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as 3 years of grief and fear and loneliness poured out of her. He stroked her hair, murmured gentle reassurances, and marveled at how right it felt to finally stop pretending they were anything other than what they'd become, two broken people who had found healing in loving each other. When the storm of emotion finally passed, Victoria pulled back slightly, her face flushed and her eyes puffy but somehow lighter than he'd ever seen them. "I love you too," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I've loved you for weeks, maybe months. I love your terrible bedside manner and the way you melt completely when Emma smiles. I love how fierce you get when you're protecting people you care about. I love that you're brave enough to let yourself be vulnerable again." Harrison felt something inside his chest expand, something warm and bright that he'd thought died with Sarah. But this wasn't the same love he'd shared with his wife. This was something new, something built on the foundation of shared loss and hard-won hope. "What happens now?" Victoria asked, her forehead resting against his. "Now we take it one day at a time," Harrison said. "We deal with Miguel together. We help Emma continue to heal. We figure out how to be a family." "A family," Victoria repeated, testing the word like she was afraid it might disappear if she said it too loud. "Unless you have somewhere else you'd rather be?" Victoria's laugh was watery but genuine. "This is exactly where I want to be. With you and Emma. For as long as you'll have me." Harrison kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was a kiss that tasted like tears and hope, like coming home after a long journey through darkness. When they broke apart, Victoria rested her head on his shoulder, and they stood in comfortable silence among Emma's artwork and therapy equipment, surrounded by evidence of healing, of progress, of love that refused to give up. "There's something else," Victoria said eventually, her voice muffled against his shirt. "What?" She pulled back to look at him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Emma's been asking me when you're going to marry me." Harrison's eyebrows shot up. "She has." Apparently, in her 8-year-old logic, people who love each other and live in the same house should get married. She's been planning the wedding for 2 weeks. She wants to walk down the aisle by herself to give me away. The image of Emma walking confidently down an aisle, her face beaming with pride and joy, made Harrison's throat tight with emotion. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes grown-ups need time to figure things out. But..." Victoria's voice grew shy. "I also told her that if such a wonderful thing ever happened, I couldn't imagine anything more perfect than having her walk me down the aisle." Harrison cupped her face again, marveling at how completely she'd become part of their story. "Victoria Morales," he said solemnly, "would you like to help me figure some things out?" "I thought you'd never ask," she whispered, and kissed him again. Outside, the stars were coming out in full force, and somewhere in the house, Emma slept peacefully, dreaming of weddings and walking in families that chose each other. And in the room where healing happened daily, 2 people who had almost given up on love were discovering that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come after the most devastating endings. We're getting close to the end of Harrison and Victoria's journey, And I have to ask, are you rooting for them? Have you ever experienced a love that came after loss, that taught you to hope again? Share in the comments below if this story is touching your heart. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more stories about families that choose each other and love that heals. 3 weeks of quiet happiness made the explosion all the more devastating when it came. Harrison was in his home office, reviewing the security arrangements he'd quietly put in place, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed his assistant's number, but her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Mr. Matthews, there are reporters at the building. They're asking about your relationship with Victoria Morales. They know about her husband." Harrison's blood turned to ice. "How many reporters?" "7 so far, but more keep arriving." "And sir?" "There's a man with them who says he's her husband. He's demanding to speak with you." The phone slipped from Harrison's fingers as the full weight of the nightmare crashed over him. Miguel was here, in Los Angeles. And somehow, he'd brought the media with him. Harrison's mind raced through the implications: his business, his reputation, but most importantly, Emma. Sweet, innocent Emma who was finally healing, finally happy, finally believing in the possibility of a complete family. He found Victoria in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared Emma's after-school snack. The peaceful domesticity of the scene, sunlight streaming through the windows, the smell of fresh cookies, the sound of her gentle voice, made what he had to tell her even more heartbreaking. "Victoria," he said, and something in his tone made her turn immediately, her face shifting from contentment to alarm. "What is it?" "Miguel's here. In Los Angeles. He's at my office building with reporters." The color drained from Victoria's face so completely that Harrison thought she might faint. She gripped the kitchen counter for support, her knuckles white with tension. "How?" she whispered. "How did he find me?" "I don't know. But Victoria, we need to." The sound of the front door opening cut him off, followed by Emma's bright voice calling out, "I'm home." "Victoria, guess what happened at school today?" Victoria's eyes went wide with panic. "She can't see me like this. She can't know." But it was too late. Emma bounced into the kitchen, her backpack sliding off her shoulder, her face glowing with the particular joy of a child who had good news to share. But the moment she saw the adults' faces, her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, her 8-year-old intuition picking up on the tension immediately. "Why do you both look scared?" Before either adult could answer, the doorbell rang. And rang again. And again, in an insistent pattern that spoke of someone who wouldn't be ignored. Harrison moved toward the front of the house, but Victoria caught his arm. "Don't answer it," she pleaded. "Please, just don't answer it." But through the frosted glass of the front door, they could see multiple silhouettes. The press had found his home address. "Daddy." Emma's voice was small and frightened. "What's happening?" That's when they heard the voice, loud enough to carry through the door, accented and angry and designed to be heard by anyone listening. "Victoria, I know you're in there. Come out and face your husband like the woman I married." Emma's face went pale. "Victoria has a husband?" The simple question, asked in a child's confused voice, shattered something fundamental in the fragile peace they'd built. Victoria's face crumpled, and Harrison saw her retreating into herself, all the progress they'd made toward trust and openness collapsing under the weight of exposure. "Emma, go to your room," Harrison said firmly. "But I don't understand. Now, Emma." The harshness in his voice, born of fear and fury, not anger at her, made Emma's eyes fill with tears. She looked between the two adults who had become her world, seeing them transform from the loving family she'd thought they were becoming into strangers keeping terrible secrets. "You lied to me," Emma said, her voice breaking. Both of you lied to me. She turned and ran from the room, her uneven gait more pronounced when she was upset, leaving Harrison and Victoria standing in the wreckage of their revealed truth. The pounding on the door intensified, accompanied now by voices shouting questions. "Mr. Matthews, is it true you're in a relationship with the wife of a convicted drug dealer? How long has Mrs. Morales been working in your home? What do you say to allegations that this relationship is inappropriate?" Victoria was backing toward the kitchen door, her face a mask of devastation and shame. "I have to go," she said, her voice barely audible. "I have to end this before it destroys you and Emma completely." "Victoria, no. This is exactly what I was afraid of," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I brought poison into your life. Into Emma's life." She looked at me like I was a stranger, Harrison. Like I was someone dangerous. "She's just confused. We can explain." "Explain what?" Victoria's voice rose, edged with hysteria. "That I lied about being married? That I've been living in your house under false pretenses? That I let an 8-year-old girl fall in love with me when I knew this day would come?" The shouting outside was getting louder, more aggressive. Harrison could hear car doors slamming, more voices joining the chaos. Soon the neighbors would notice. Soon this would be the lead story on every entertainment news show in the city. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for us," Harrison said desperately. "We'll fight this together. I have lawyers, security." "And what happens to Emma while we're fighting?" Victoria demanded. "What happens when she has to go to school knowing that everyone has seen her family splashed across the tabloids? What happens when she realizes the woman she trusted was lying to her from the very beginning?" The words hit Harrison like physical blows because he could see the truth in them. Emma, who had finally begun to trust again, to hope again, to believe in the words hit Harrison like physical blows because he could see the truth in them. Emma, who had finally begun to trust again, to hope again, to believe in the possibility of a complete family, would be devastated by this betrayal. "Victoria, please." But she was already moving, grabbing her purse from the counter with shaking hands. "I'm going to go out there and tell them the truth. That I deceived you, that you had no idea about my past, that this is all my fault. That's not the truth, and you know it. It's the only truth that protects you and Emma." Victoria's voice was steady now, resigned. "I love you both too much to let my past destroy your future." Harrison grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "If you walk out that door, you're not protecting us, you're abandoning us. Just like everyone else who claimed to love Emma has abandoned her." The accusation was cruel and unfair, and Harrison regretted it the moment he saw Victoria flinch as if he'd struck her. But desperation made him vicious. "That's not fair," Victoria whispered. "Isn't it? Emma finally has a mother figure she trusts, and you're going to disappear the moment things get difficult. You're going to prove to her that loving someone is dangerous, that people leave when the cost gets too high." Victoria's face went white. "You think I want to leave? You think this is easy for me? I think you're so used to people hurting you that you'd rather hurt yourself than risk letting us fight for you." The words exploded between them like a bomb. 3 weeks of careful trust and growing love disintegrating under the pressure of fear and accusation. "How dare you?" Victoria breathed, her voice shaking with fury and pain. "How dare you make this about my weakness when you're the one who spent 3 days treating me like a stranger the moment someone questioned our relationship? You're the one who pulled away the second things got complicated." "That was different. It was exactly the same." Victoria's voice broke on a sob. "The first sign of trouble, and you decided I wasn't worth the risk. Just like you're doing now, making this my choice so you don't have to take responsibility for giving up on us." The accusation hung between them like poison, and Harrison realized with sick clarity that she was right. He was pushing her away, making her the villain in their story so he could go back to his safe, controlled life without having to admit that he was terrified of fighting for something he might lose. Outside, Miguel's voice rose above the chaos. "She's probably poisoned your daughter's mind too. That's what she does. She destroys families." The cruel words seemed to break something final in Victoria. She looked at Harrison with eyes full of devastation and exhausted defeat. "Maybe he's right," she whispered. "Maybe I do destroy everything I touch." "Victoria, don't." But she was already walking toward the front door, her shoulders set in a line of desperate resolution. "Tell Emma I'm sorry. Tell her that loving her was the most beautiful thing I've ever done, even if I did it wrong." Harrison watched the woman he loved walk toward her own destruction, and realized that his fear had accomplished exactly what Miguel's threats couldn't. It had driven her away from the family that needed her most. The sound of the front door opening was followed by an explosion of camera flashes and shouting voices. And somewhere upstairs, Emma was crying alone, the adults who were supposed to protect her having shattered her world with their secrets and their cowardice. Harrison sank into a kitchen chair and buried his face in his hands, surrounded by the remnants of their happiness. Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, Victoria's coffee cup still warm on the counter, the cookies she'd been baking now burning in the oven. He had lost everything that mattered, and this time, he had no one to blame but himself. The mansion felt like a tomb. Harrison sat in his study at 2 a.m., surrounded by legal documents and security reports, but the words blurred together meaninglessly. The house was too quiet, no soft humming from the kitchen, no gentle Spanish lullabies drifting down from Emma's room, no warm laughter echoing through the halls. Victoria had been gone for 18 hours. The media circus had died down after she'd given her statement on the front steps, a carefully worded confession that painted her as the sole deceiver and Harrison as an innocent victim. She'd answered every cruel question with quiet dignity, deflected every attempt to implicate him in wrongdoing, and then disappeared into a taxi while cameras flashed around her. Miguel had tried to follow, shouting about reconciliation and second chances, but Victoria had looked right through him as if he were a stranger. The last image Harrison had of her was through his security monitors, her face pressed against the taxi window, tears streaming down her cheeks as she looked back at the house that had been her home. The lawyers said the story would blow over in a few days. The media would move on to fresher scandals. His business reputation would survive intact. Everything could go back to the way it was before. The thought made Harrison physically sick. Emma hadn't spoken to him since Victoria left. She'd refused dinner, ignored his attempts at explanation, and locked herself in her room with a determination that reminded him painfully of himself. The one time he tried to enter, he'd found her sitting on the floor, systematically tearing up every drawing she'd made of their family, the ones where 3 smiling figures held hands under rainbows. "She lied to me," Emma had said without looking up, her 8-year-old voice flat and emotionless. "You both lied to me. So I don't want to talk to anybody anymore." Now Harrison stared at his phone, Victoria's contact information glowing on the screen. He tried calling 17 times. She wasn't answering. David had stopped by earlier with champagne and congratulations, praising Harrison for dodging a bullet and getting back to focusing on what really matters. Harrison had thrown him out with such vehemence that his oldest friend had left looking genuinely shaken. Because David was wrong about what mattered. What mattered was upstairs in a little girl's bedroom, surrounded by torn paper and broken dreams. What mattered was somewhere in the city, probably crying alone in a cheap hotel room, convinced she destroyed the only family she'd found since losing her brother. What mattered was the choice Harrison had to make: stay safe in his tower of wealth and isolation, or risk everything to fight for the people he loved. The knock on his study door was so soft he almost missed it. Emma stood in the doorway in her pajamas, her hair tangled from tossing and turning, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I can't sleep," she said in a small voice. Harrison's heart broke a little more. "Come here, baby girl." Emma approached slowly, as if she wasn't sure she trusted him, but eventually climbed into his lap the way she used to when she was smaller. She felt so fragile in his arms, like something precious that could shatter if handled roughly. "Is Victoria ever coming back?" Emma asked, her voice muffled against his chest. Harrison closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his daughter's trust and his own failures. "I don't know, sweetheart." "Do you love her?" The question was so direct, so honest, that Harrison couldn't hide behind adult complications or gentle deflections. "Yes, I do. Very much." "Then why did you let her leave?" The simplicity of the question cut deeper than any accusation could have. Why had he let her leave? Why had he stood there and watched the best thing that had happened to their family walk away? "Because I was scared," he admitted. Emma pulled back to look at him, her young face serious. Scared of what? Scared of what people would think. Scared of the problems her past might cause. Scared of losing her the way I lost your mommy. Emma considered this with the gravity that children bring to important conversations. "But Daddy, she was already part of our family. She was already here, making me stronger and making you smile again. The scary stuff was just outside stuff." Out of the mouths of babes. Harrison stared at his 8-year-old daughter and realized she understood something that had taken him 42 years to learn. Love wasn't about avoiding risk. It was about deciding what was worth the risk. "You're right," he said simply. "So what are we going to do about it?" The question hung in the air between them, and Harrison realized this was the moment, the choice that would define not just his future, but Emma's understanding of how families fight for each other. "What do you think we should do?" he asked. Emma's face grew determined, and for a moment, Harrison saw flashes of the woman she would become, strong, decisive, brave in ways he was still learning to be. "I think we should find her and bring her home," Emma said firmly. "I think we should tell everyone that she's our family and we don't care what her husband did because she didn't do those bad things. And I think we should ask her to marry you so she can be my mom for real and nobody can make her leave again." Harrison felt something shift inside his chest, a door opening, light flooding into spaces that had been dark for too long. "That's a very good plan, Emma. But it might be complicated. People might say mean things about us for a while." Emma's chin lifted with stubborn determination. "Let them. Victoria taught me that being brave means doing the right thing even when it's scary. And the right thing is keeping our family together." Harrison hugged his daughter tightly, marveling at the wisdom hidden in her young heart. "When did you get so smart?" "Victoria taught me that too," Emma said simply. "She taught me lots of things. That's why we have to find her, Daddy. I'm not done learning from her yet." Harrison looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not a fragile child to be protected, but a strong young woman who understood love better than most adults. Emma had been walking for weeks now, but this was the moment Harrison realized she'd also been growing into someone extraordinary. "Okay," he said, his voice steady with new resolve. "Let's go bring our family home." Emma's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Really? Really? But Emma, it might not be easy. Victoria might think she's protecting us by staying away. We might have to work very hard to convince her that we're stronger together than apart." "Then we'll work hard," Emma said with the absolute confidence of a child who had already overcome impossible things. "We'll work as hard as it takes." Harrison stood, lifting Emma in his arms, feeling purpose flood through him for the first time since Victoria had walked out the door. "Then let's get started. We have a family to save." As he carried Emma upstairs, both of them finally ready to sleep, Harrison felt something he hadn't experienced in years, certainty. Not certainty that everything would be easy, but certainty that everything would be worth it. Tomorrow, he would find Victoria. Tomorrow, he would fight for the woman who had saved his family. Tomorrow, he would prove that love, real, stubborn, imperfect love, was stronger than fear, stronger than scandal, stronger than the voices that said they didn't belong together. Tomorrow, he would choose love. And this time, he wouldn't let anyone, including himself, take it away. The cheap motel room smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Victoria sat on the edge of the sagging bed, staring at the television screen where her own face looked back at her from the morning news. The reporter was calling it a developing story about deception in elite circles, but all Victoria could see was the wreckage she'd left behind. Her phone had been ringing for hours, Harrison's name appearing on the screen over and over until she'd finally turned it off. She couldn't bear to hear his voice, couldn't risk the possibility that he might try to convince her to come back when she knew that leaving was the only way to protect him and Emma from her toxic past. A soft knock on the door made her freeze. The media had found her twice already, forcing her to move hotels both times. She considered ignoring it, but the knock came again, gentle, patient, nothing like the aggressive pounding of reporters. Victoria. The voice was small, young, and impossible. Victoria's heart stopped. She rushed to the door and looked through the peephole, and there they were, Harrison in a simple sweater and jeans, Emma in her favorite purple dress, both of them looking tired but determined. Emma. Victoria called through the door. "What are you doing here? How did you find me?" "Daddy hired investigators," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "And I told him we weren't leaving until we found you because families don't give up on each other." Victoria's hands shook as she unlocked the door, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously at the sight of them. Emma immediately launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Victoria's waist with fierce determination. "Don't you ever leave us again," Emma said, her voice muffled against Victoria's stomach. "Don't you ever leave us again." Victoria looked over Emma's head at Harrison, seeing exhaustion and pain in his eyes, but also something else, something that looked like absolute resolve. "You shouldn't be here," Victoria whispered. "The reporters, the scandal." "Is yesterday's news," Harrison said firmly, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "Literally. There was a political scandal that broke this morning. The media has moved on. But Miguel is on a plane back to Guatemala, courtesy of some very expensive lawyers and some very persuasive immigration officials." Harrison's voice carried the cold efficiency that had made him a corporate legend. "He won't be bothering anyone again." Victoria stared at him in shock. "How did you?" "I told you I had resources," Harrison said simply. "And I told you that anyone who threatened my family would regret it." "My family." The words hit Victoria like a warm wave, but she forced herself to step back, to maintain the distance that logic demanded. "Harrison, you don't understand. Even if Miguel is gone, even if the media loses interest, I still lied to you. I still deceived you about who I was." Emma looked up at her with 8-year-old directness. "Did you lie about loving us?" "No," Victoria said immediately. "Never that." "Did you lie about helping me walk?" "Of course not." "Did you lie about making Daddy smile again and making our house feel like a home?" Victoria's throat closed. "Emma." "Then I don't care about the other stuff," Emma declared with stunning simplicity. "The other stuff doesn't matter because it doesn't change the important things." Harrison moved closer, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "She's right. What matters is that you saved us, Victoria. You saved my daughter, and you saved me. Everything else is just details." Victoria shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know what you're saying. The complications, the legal issues, the social, will be handled by very expensive lawyers and very good security, Harrison interrupted. Victoria, I spent 3 years hiding from life because I was afraid of losing what I loved. I'm not making that mistake again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made Victoria's breath catch, a small velvet box that looked impossibly expensive and absolutely perfect. Harrison, what are you? I'm asking you to marry me, he said simply, dropping to one knee right there in the shabby motel room. I'm asking you to be Emma's mother officially, legally, permanently. I'm asking you to let us spend the rest of our lives proving that love is stronger than fear. Emma clapped her hands together, bouncing on her toes. And I'm asking you to let me walk you down the aisle just like we talked about. Because you taught me that sometimes the most important steps are the ones we take toward the people we love. Victoria looked between them, this man who had risked everything to find her, this little girl who had traveled across the city to bring her home, and felt her carefully constructed walls crumble completely. I'm broken, she whispered. I'm damaged goods with a complicated past and a heart full of scars. So am I, Harrison said softly. So is Emma. But we're broken together, and that makes us whole. Victoria, Emma said seriously, taking her hand, you taught me that our bodies might be broken, but our spirits don't have to be. Well, maybe our pasts are broken too, but our future doesn't have to be. The wisdom in those young words broke something open in Victoria's chest, something that had been locked away since Diego died, since Miguel betrayed her, since she'd learned that loving people meant risking everything. Yes, she whispered, and then louder, yes. Yes to all of it. Yes to being a family, yes to taking the risk, yes to loving you both more than I'm afraid of losing you. Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple, elegant band that caught the afternoon light streaming through the motel window and made it look like something magical. Emma cheered and threw her arms around both adults, creating a group hug that felt like coming home after a long journey through darkness. Does this mean I can call you Mom now? Emma asked, her face glowing with happiness. If you want to, Victoria said, her voice thick with tears and joy. I want to, Emma said firmly. I've wanted to for weeks. As they held each other in that unlikely setting, a cheap motel room that would become part of their family legend, Victoria realized that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings happen in the most unexpected places. Sometimes love finds you when you're running away from it. Sometimes families are built not from blood or biology, but from choice and courage and the decision to keep loving even when it's terrifying. 6 months later, Emma did indeed walk Victoria down the aisle of a small church filled with people who had chosen to celebrate love over scandal, hope over fear. She walked steadily, confidently, with no assistance except her own determination and the knowledge that she was giving away the woman who had taught her to believe in impossible things. The headlines that day read, Tech mogul marries former employee in heartwarming ceremony. But the real story was much simpler and much more powerful. A little girl had gotten her mother back, a broken man had learned to love again, and a woman who thought she'd lost everything had discovered that sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding what truly matters. And in the therapy room of their home, Emma's newest painting hung in the place of honor, 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow, with words written in careful 8-year-old handwriting, Love always wins. Because it does. Even when it's complicated. Even when it's scary. Even when the world tells you it's impossible. Love always wins. Thank you for journeying with us through Harrison, Victoria, and Emma's story of love conquering fear and families choosing each other. What did you think of their journey? Have you ever had to fight for love when everyone told you it was impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories touch your hearts. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about love, hope, and the families we create by choice. Until next time, remember, love always wins.